Hello everyone. Today we're going to be diving into George Knapp's presentation on Skinwalker Ranch, only the UFO parts. Before we begin, a little personal confession of mine. This video you're watching now is my second take that I recorded of this video because on the first attempt, I tried to cover all the stories George Knapp talks about in his presentation and ended up with a video that was 55 minutes long. So in this video you're watching now, we will only be covering the UFO related stories talked about in his presentation. After all, this is a UFO channel. For those who don't know the tale of Skinwalker Ranch, it is the most recognized and most scientifically studied paranormal hotspot on the planet. A 512-acre secure site that was riddled with UFO activity, cattle mutilations, and extremely strange phenomena. Now there's been many stories and much criticism that has come out of Skinwalker Ranch, but for the purpose of this video, we will only be talking about the UFO related subjects while recapping the presentation that George gave on Skinwalker Ranch. This took place at the McMenamins Hotel in Oregon's 19th Annual UFOFest. George has always been a longtime hero of mine, and I've always enjoyed his presentations, so I thought I'd share this one with you in case you missed it or just don't want to watch the whole 2-hour-long presentation to pick out the UFO parts. But before we begin, you'll notice that I'll be changing the visuals of the presentation so I don't run into any copyright issues. I hope it's not too distracting. And as always, I encourage you to watch the full version of any recap I do. The link is always in the description down below. Okay, let's start. George begins talking UFOs as it relates to the ranch with these statements.
So it's an exciting time for the UFO topic. Big things are underway. I think my friend Jeremy Corbell was talking about it the other night, for those of you who are here, about all these different acronyms and programs. And if you think about, I know it seems like progress is slow and we get frustrated that more information doesn't come out about UFOs in general, but wow, a lot of stuff has happened here since last October. Last October, on a stage in Seattle, a guy named Lou Elizondo stepped forward and said, the fact is the U.S. government has been studying UFOs. It never stopped in 1969, as we were told when Project Blue Book ended. Of course they've been studying it.
He says there's a long trail of breadcrumbs in the UFO subject that lead back to Las Vegas, Bob Bigelow, and Skinwalker Ranch. He talks about the release of the Tic Tac UFO footage and how UFO people normally complain about this stuff.
About the Tic Tac UFO. Those videos were released. People complained about them, which is what we UFO folks do. They're too grainy, they're not long enough, we don't know what it is. Maybe it's a bird, maybe it's a balloon. Well, it's not a bird, and it's not a balloon, and it's not another airplane. It's something from somewhere else. It does things that we can't do.
He says that Skinwalker Ranch is a UFO story, but that it's much bigger and broader than that.
And so we will talk about UFOs, but this is not really a UFO story. It's much bigger than that, much broader. And the reality of what happened at that ranch, at that property, suggests that there is a connection between UFOs and a lot of other things that people categorize as paranormal. What that connection is, well, maybe we can explore that together to try to figure it out. It's almost like the UFOs are the shiny bauble that is used to sort of lure us into the dark forest where other kinds of murky beings reside.
He addresses that at one point the U.S. government got involved.
In right around 2004, 2005, because the activity at the ranch had gone underground. What we learned later, though, and I was not able to talk about this either, is that a new study began in 2008, and it was funded by you. It was funded by American taxpayers. And it was conducted at the suggestion of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the DIA. And so for a couple of years there, government-funded investigators, some of the same people who had worked for NIDS, were on the property investigating the paranormal, UFOs, and a whole bunch of other stuff that are way beyond what you would think a normal UFO or government study would be interested in.
George then speaks a little bit about the history of the area as it relates to UFOs.
This area, the Uinta Basin, has a history as a UFO hotspot. For as long as humans have lived there, people have been seeing strange things in the sky, what we would call UFOs. The first Europeans to cross that area, the basin, Father Escalante, 1776, leading Spanish missionaries, and they reported in their journals strange lights in the sky above their campfire. The Utes who have lived there, they have 15 generations back of stories that they tell about the sky people and objects in the sky and things on this particular piece of property.
He goes into talking about many stories of the ranch, and I encourage you to check out the entire presentation to hear those. But again, if I were to include them in this video would be far too long. After talking about the stories, he gets back to UFOs with the following.
Bulletproof wolves, strange animals, mystery voices, strange lights, poltergeist. What do you need after that? You need UFOs. So they started seeing a bunch of them. The first one they saw, it looked like an RV. It was at the third homestead, down at the other end of the property, and the rancher and his son are out at night, and they see what they think are headlights coming from the third ranch toward their house. They wondered, how the hell did this guy get down there in a Winnebago? He must be stuck. Let's go help him. So they start walking in that direction. The headlights start coming toward them. Then the headlights go up, and over the trees and out. And they described it, once it was in the sky, they described it as what UFO researchers would call a chupa. What was seen in Brazil for a lot of years, a big refrigerator-looking thing or an RV type shape. But it clearly was not a Winnebago. If it was a Winnebago, I'd like to buy one of those flying Winnebagos.
Here's some more stories about UFOs at Skinwalker Ranch.
Next, they started seeing these daylight sightings of silver discs. They saw classic flying saucers, except the one that they encountered generated an emotional response in them. And they were elated, almost giddy, like it was accessing something in their brain to mess with their emotions. Now, that wouldn't be the only time that happened. There were other craft and orbs and things that they saw that had the opposite effect. There were some UFOs that looked like stealth fighters that would float silently over the property. Ellen saw them first at the gate again, and they were ringed by what looked like Christmas lights or disco lights. There were a couple of times when they would just appear over Tom. He was out at night in the pasture, and then boom, there's one right there. He took to stalking them. He'd go out with a rifle at night. He was thinking it's the government doing this stuff, that the government is somehow trying to drive him off his land, so he'd get his gun, and he was ready to shoot one out of the sky. But he'd watch it, he'd hide. So these things are not omnipotent. They could be fooled. But he'd watch them floating around over the property, shining spotlights over the ranch at different spots. And it's cold the night that he's telling the story about, and he moves his knee and it cracks. And this thing reacts. It hears the crack and reacts and shines a light in his direction, and he took off.
Then George talks about what seems to be abduction stories. The reason I say that is because I've heard numerous stories where people having encounters don't have the typical wake up to aliens around their beds and medical-like procedures done to them, but there are many stories in the abduction phenomena where people have strange dreams and then wake up with scars. Here, take a look at what George has to say.
They started having weird dreams. In addition to seeing the things outside the window, they would have the same dreams at night, the husband and wife, and then in these dreams, these beings in the sky are watching them and talking about them. And they said, oh yeah, Tom, he knows, he's aware we're here. When they wake up and they both tell the same dream again, they're upset about it. A couple of times they would wake up and they'd have these scoop marks on their hands and fingers. So that it's really trying to scare the hell out of them.
That kind of story sounds familiar to me, but that's for another video. Here's a UFO story about saucers hitting trees.
They had a UFO that came up over that same part of the property. The rancher kind of joked about it. It was pilot error that clipped the tops off of these cottonwood trees. 50 or so feet of the top of these trees were chopped off, and it was a big, like a little U left in the tops of these trees.
Now George talks a little bit about Bigelow and how he started NIDS, and I think it's important to include this. So let's watch.
NIDS is the National Institute for Discovery Science. Bob Bigelow created this organization because he was basically dissatisfied with the major UFO organizations. He'd offer them $1 million to do some quality work. It's a long story, but they screwed it up. And so he formed his own organization, and some of these people were world class. A couple of astronauts one man who had been on the moon, 2 US senators, a really amazing group of people. That's the Science Advisory Board. And then they had rapid response teams, people like Colin Kelleher, Eric Davis, veterinarians, trackers. If they had an outbreak of mutilation somewhere, they put them on a plane and send them there, take samples, send it to labs, try to figure this stuff out. Same thing with UFO hotspots. They're doing what science is supposed to do.
But work didn't come easy to the NIDS team. Let's listen to some details in this short clip.
So they come in like gangbusters, and the stuff starts happening to them. And they're there interacting at the same time with the rancher. They start seeing the same things, the balls of light, but it's always just out, it operates under its own rules. And it was always just outside of camera range. They had a lot of equipment malfunctions. Batteries would die, vehicles would die at the same points in the property. They'd have compasses that would just go crazy. There was a lot of really weird, measurable stuff.
Now, I know I said I was only going to talk about UFO-related subjects, but I've decided to include 2 stories that are a little on the fringe of the subject. One of the stories is of something speaking through one of the NIDS team members. Here, take a look.
They had some really harrowing encounters on the property themselves. There was, those 2 guys were walking, again, in the middle homestead at night. They have a couple of dogs with them. And the dogs suddenly go behind their legs. They're hiding, they're scared of something. And up at the top of the trees, they see this dark cloud that's floating. It's floating across the trees, getting bigger and bigger, and it stops right in front of them, and they freeze. And this thing, Eric Davis, who's a PhD physicist, brilliant man, has worked for top secret labs and things, he's frozen. And suddenly another voice comes out of him. It's not his, it's them. We're watching you. He's saying this, we're watching you. Colin is looking at him, what? And it's not him, it's somebody else speaking through him in a different voice. He snaps out of it after a couple of minutes. The cloud goes away. Eric was messed up for a couple of days, having terrible dreams, couldn't sleep.
And this next story talks about portals and how things would come in and out of them. It's real interesting. Let's have a listen.
Among the strange things that the rancher had seen in the sky were these really big, almost like a sun, a big orange orb that would appear once in a while on the property. And he would get out his scope, and on occasion, you look through these orange orbs. They're not orbs at all, like a hole in the sky. And on the other side was another sky, and it was different. If it was daytime here, it's nighttime over there. If it was daytime there, it was nighttime here. And occasionally, he would see things flying in and out of what looked like a portal. At other times on the property, he'd see these amorphous yellowish balls of light that would appear at different times in association with phenomena. When these balls of light would appear floating over the pasture, weird stuff would happen. Creatures would appear. Well, one night, while the NIDS guys are on the property, they have an experience with one of these yellow balls of light that strongly suggested to them that the ranch is a highway, a portal, a road to other realities.
Last on the UFO spectrum is a really short clip narrated by Jeremy Corbell. Let's watch.
In 1978, a local newspaper reported high activity in the Uinta Basin. Silver dome-shaped objects were seen, flying saucers. Some witnesses observing the display from close proximity, from underneath the craft. UFOs were buzzing the locals with jagged green lights like fire.
To end this presentation, George gives these closing words.
But I mean, we don't know the answer. Nobody knows the answer. How does all this stuff fit together? Is it ET or alien? Well, it's not exactly what we think of as ET. Is it the military? Maybe, some of it. It could be the military doing some psychological exercise. Did the military take that calf, and carve it up and dump it back there? Did commandos get into the bathroom and take the towel and the hairbrush? Imagine giving that order. Go take her hairbrush and put it in the freezer. The military didn't do all this stuff. This stuff has been going on for 250 years. Maybe they're doing it now, but they didn't start it. So that's not an explanation. Interdimensional? I don't know. I don't know. Is it all related? It seems like we got a learning curve here, that it's telling us that it is somehow related, that reality isn't what it used to be, that it's much more wondrous and mysterious than we might imagine, and we need to start thinking about it in those kinds of terms. At least I hope that's what it is, as opposed to just alien teenagers just messing with us.
Now, there are several angles I could take this video from here. Here's the angle that many subscribe to, that Skinwalker Ranch is a huge hoax, a collaboration of stories by a lot of people full of nonsense. Another angle is that there is some sort of evil supernatural presence at the site that was set loose in the past and now messes with whoever dares step foot on the property. And then there's the angle that I like, which involves a little bit of everything. And honestly, it involves a lot of my imagination and opinion. In my take, I think that if I am going to buy the story of Skinwalker Ranch, meaning that I have to believe it, I'm going to go with the portal theory, that somehow, some way, a portal to another world was opened up by people a long time ago, or by entities from another plane, or even ETs, and that things that we don't quite understand move through this portal from one reality to another. But again, that's me tightly putting on my tinfoil hat and giving my opinion. And just a quick thought. All throughout history, there have been stories and fairy tales of people wandering into enchanted places, be it a forest, a mysterious area, and running into strange creatures, fairies, elves, dragons, mermaids, and even monsters. All things that could be completely imaginary. Or maybe, just maybe, someone a long time ago wandered into an area like Skinwalker Ranch and found themselves face to face with something from another existence. But that's just a thought I'll leave you with. What do you all think? What's your theory on the happenings on Skinwalker Ranch? Let us know in the comments down below. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss any of these videos. And as always, this is Jesse. Let's keep pondering these fringe subjects because we love the UFOs. Till next time.